Welcome everyone to our study of the Buddhist psychology of awakening. It's heading towards the end. I'm thinking that might even end today. And I have another program lined up actually. I was mentioning one text, but I've actually decided to go with a suggestion from someone which is what's called the progressive stages on the meditation of emptiness, which is actually in the modern context a little bit particular to the Kagyu tradition. It's actually a classic, and it's Khenpo Tsultring Gyatso, who essentially takes us through the tenets. And we've already been looking at the tenets. I think it was here. It might have been somewhere else, but I think in general we have talked about the Vibhashika, the Sutrantika, the Yogacarya, and the Madhyamaka. I might have made references to it. Anyway, since since you're able to hang in there with the 18 dhatus and the 75 and what have you, this is just 4 piece of cake, and it is really very, very valuable in terms of us understanding Buddhism. You could say it's a discussion that will take us through various understandings of the two truths. But it's very, very helpful, both in terms of us coming from a culture in which we have, you could say, the idea of the reality as founded on particle science or whatever, and also from the point of view of what we can call the epistemological recognition that we actually see what we think we see. And in fact, are we really seeing reality? So we have what's called the two traditions of Vibhashika and Sutrantika that operate with these two angles. You could say one is ontological, one is epistemological. But we won't be using too much Greek, and mainly it will be presentation of these ways of engaging the perspective from the point of view of practitioner of meditation. So it is, as the title implies, an exploration of the progressive stages of the meditations on emptiness. And then also, in addition to those two, we'll go through what is known as the Yogacarya tradition, which is the way that we explain how our relative perceptions have a lot to do with our mind. And essentially, it's our mind that goes through this transformation between being confused and not being confused. Mind is rather an important element. We probably can all agree. And so that's the Yogacarya message. And then finally the Madhyamaka message, which is very much the great open dimension in which nothing can be grasped. And that groundlessness actually enables us to understand our entire reality much better, including also our relative reality. So the Madhyamaka middle way, if you like, view is something that is universal to all of Buddhism. And it's really, I'd say it's not really fair to assume that we can understand the Buddhist teaching without understanding the middle way. It's not fair to not discuss the middle way. And so the middle way is wonderful. So we're going to be looking at that. Anyway, so I think today we'll do this, and also I'm going to leave a little bit of a buffer between finishing and then starting the other one. So perhaps next week I'll be going through some other material, and I think probably beginning the other text maybe 2 weeks from now, 2 or 3 weeks from now, I'll put in something that we'll look at here on Mondays before we begin that. So that's the plan. Meanwhile, we are presently looking at Steven's summary of what we have looked at here in terms of this particular Abhidharma study. So we'll look at that. So yes, this is called the progressive stages of the meditation on emptiness. Yeah. Yeah. Progressive stages on the meditation of emptiness. I think that's it. Okay. Kebotsulting Gyatso. And I was going to look at a book by Andy Carr, but I've already done that. And I would say Andy's book can actually be, you could say, a supplement to this. But Andy also Andy draws on Khenpo Tsultring Gyatso's teaching. So in a way, we're going kind of more to the heart of the source, really. And then I can refer to Andy's book for you could say an unpacking of this topic. Anyway, I'll try to do some unpacking as well, and so we should get to the bottom of it, I'm sure. Okay, so presently we are then looking at the summary of this work by Steven. And so last time we looked at a little bit sort of the universal nature of the Abhidharma study altogether. But now we're looking just at Steven's summary of the dhatus. And again, drawing on the language of contemporary physics, I gather. Then Steven says, as we've seen, one of the schemes of smashing through is the 18 dhatus. So of course, what Steven referred to here is his image of this prajna, and the process of Abhidharma essentially being something like a what is it, a particle collider or something like that? Yeah, atom smasher, collider, etc. So this, of course, it's a valid image, and of course it implies how we're not really seeing reality for what it is, and we actually need to break through and go beyond our assumptions, and that is where the equipment that we're provided with in the Abhidharma really serves us to smash through our assumptions. So Steven says, we went through the analytic explanation, but we will remember that in practice, when we're doing dhatu analysis, we are simply and precisely aware of which channel we are broadcasting on. So that means as we're practicing meditation, we are aware. Of course, this is basic to the mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feeling, as we have it in all the Buddhist traditions. But it is also at the same time that we are feeling and being aware of particular consciousnesses or thoughts. It's not just that we are aware of them, but we're also aware that our experience is comprised of these elements. And that's where the dhatu analysis helps us break down experience in terms of identifying the components, object, subject, and the consciousness that's, or rather you could say, object, faculty, and the consciousness that's generated on the basis of these. So he says, simply cultivating the habit of knowing what channel we are broadcasting on is a very powerful way of smashing through the arrogant bewilderment that makes the noise I. And that's also a very sweet way of putting it, because the Tibetan word for fixation or self, what we could call, ego, which is actually a bit more complex. You see, in the Western word term ego, it's almost like a solid, the sort of solid, whipping boy, the ego. And in fact, in this Tibetan, we're just saying ngaja, we're saying ngarzin, which is fixating on this I, because I happens. The Buddha also says, I have taught, etc. But there's a place where this I becomes fixation, and that's very different. That's where we go from being mere I into being I fixation. And that's where we then have this the Tibetan term for pride or arrogance is, interestingly enough, ngajal, which means I, the victorious I, or I arrogance, or I bewilderment. And so that's where the whole, you could say, toxicity of I comes about through allocating this solidity or imputing, looking at these components and just saying this is one solid entity, and then saying this is my experience, me and my object. But in fact, the moment that we begin to take away the imputation there of a solid unitary experience, we can see it's comprised of the object, the faculty, and the generated consciousness. And then we also operate within these various consciousnesses. So Steven says the purpose of doing this analysis is so that we can know what channel we're on, or more precisely, that this I, when smashed, is simply a hexamodal complex, which again is the 6 channels that we're broadcasting on. Again, we're running a show, right, which is our experience, and this is in fact made up of these various channels, these various consciousnesses, as well as mind, and there's 6 of them. So this is what then Steven refers to as hexamodal, meaning 6-fold complex. So he says, if we smash what we call an I, we have 6 channels. All living beings have 6 channels. This practice of dhatu analysis alone is extremely powerful, and unlike some other extreme yogic practices, it won't send you to the chiropractor. This is it's not too hard. Okay, he's referring to some people who sort of prematurely attempt Tibetan yoga, I guess, or I don't know, prostrations maybe, if you're having a hard time with, you know, maybe Steven was very tall, so maybe he had some, you know, issues when he was doing prostrations. I don't know, but anyway, there's definitely a very powerful component in this type of practice, and like he says, it's not too hard. He says we spend quite a bit of time recounting the stories of what kind of smashing occurred on channel 6, studying the various energy packets that are involved in channel 6. So that's of course then in the case of the mind. He says now we have an inventory of all the different programs that have ever been broadcast on channel 6 anywhere, anytime. So at the end of the day, everything that we experience, of course, runs through the mind, consciousness. Now he says, we may want a story. We may want them to combine with each other. We have these stories all the time, but all those stories are made up of nothing but these elements. The general ones, the wholesome ones, the unwholesome ones. You can weave any story you want. So in combination with the dhatus, then of course we have all the experiences that we have, all the dramas, the stories. These then are what we've looked at in terms of the wholesome factors, the unwholesome factors, and so on. So all of this comes down to the narratives that we weave, the samsaric dramas, the experience of I, and this continuing experience of the saga of myself in countless chapters. So the sense spaces, ayatanas. So these are essentially the, again, subject, object. Yeah. He says there's also another way of combining or making sense of our experience. Just for a sense of completeness here, this is the group of 12 ayatanas. Now, I'd like to say to anybody of you who practice sadhana or come across Vajrayana, it's so often that we come across the notion of deity. And what in fact we mean with deity is the purity that everything that we are discussing here in the Abhidharma actually has. in its purity, when all our experience is no longer turned into the drama of me, but are simply just perceptions, appearances, and they're free from the filter of reacting, ignorance, solidification, and what we call the various styles of obscuration. When everything we're discussing here in terms of experience, in terms of ourself and the phenomenal world, when it's free of these filters of confusion, they abide in their natural purity. And this is what we mean with mandala, deity, mandala, and so on. It's simply just acknowledging the purity that exists intrinsic to nature. So we as a sentient being, we experience, on the basis of our karma, we experience this body, Jakob, and within this particular environment. And in the unconfused condition, this, you could say, array of body, speech, and mind that is basic to all experience, all, you could say, the array, the entire package of life, if you like. When it's not confused, it is then mandala and deity. And that's where, when you're practicing sadhana, which is a method in which you can reaffirm your commitment to this vision and engage in the various forms of yoga associated with perceptions in terms of our energy, in terms of our mind, what we call yoga, body, speech, and mind. It's basic to all sadhana. Then you will very often see the terms that the mandala of the 3 seats, which are then Punkam and Kyeche in Tibetan. Well, we would say the purity of skandhas, ayatanas, and dhatus. So this is what we're looking at here in Abhidharma. Sometimes these 3 seats are sort of understood in a slightly different way, but anyway, basically, we would say the purity of these aspects of our being, the skandhas, the ayatanas, and the dhatus, purity of that is what we mean with deity. So this is just to essentially make this discussion here relevant if you are such a sadhana person. So Steven says, with regards then to these ayatanas, and this is just so you don't worry. Okay, we've basically in the Abhidharma we talk about these 3, you could say, main themes: the skandhas, the 5 skandhas, what we're going to look at now, the ayatanas, there's 12, and then the dhatus, which we have looked at, which there were 18. So Steven says there is also another way of combining or making sense of our experience. Just for a sense of completeness here, there is a group of 12 ayatanas. We already explored this in the context of sensation, Vedana, and saw how all of our experiences can be seen to involve a cessation, a sensation, a response of some sort, either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. The model consists of 2 groups of 6 called internal and 6 called external. It says that these internal sense bases are the doors through which experience enters. So in Tibetan it's Kyemche, which really just means that which brings about experience, or the arising or birth of experience. So then with regards to the Sanskrit, then Steven says Aya means arrives or emerges or is born, and Tana means that which furthers or extends or goes or spreads. What is arriving and then spreading is called sensation, which is differentiated in 6 ways. Remember that sensation is one of the factors of experience. We know that sensation is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither one nor the other. We might say that the ayatanas are things that further the arising of sensation. The internal ones are the doorways through which sensations arrive, and the external ones are those which have contact with sense fields, 6 in number, the 6 channels. So it's fairly familiar material. Each time there's contact, the internal and external sense bases are coordinated. There's a resonance, or there's a vibration. It is at that point that there arises a sensation. Sensation here is not a physical thing. Remember that the Ayatanas were taught in order to counteract the wrong belief that the so-called self is made up of physical stuff. When one is analyzing or experiencing in the way of Ayatanas, one is training oneself to pay attention to how our channels fire. We can think of channels as the arising and spreading of a sensation. So this is pretty much familiar material. It's really just talking about the external object and then the internal perceiver. Anyway, he says one is encouraged to pay attention to the arising and spreading of different sensations as they occur. If one is practicing the Ayatana way of viewing, one is focusing one's mind on the arising of sensation. When I look at something, channel 1, that's the first, channel, I don't focus on what I'm seeing. That would be data analysis, but rather on the sensation, which is arising due to the activation or firing of that channel. So that's where there is a particular sense. And this is where at a very basic level, we then have this like, dislike, or just neutral. So Steven says, you're paying attention to the arising of sensations. The object of attention is the sensation. We hear something, that's channel 2. What is the associated sensation which is arising? For those who are rather in their heads a lot, who is preoccupied with mental stuff and cut off from just feeling and tuning into sensations, they will find this kind of analysis a bit of a challenge. They're not so much in their bodies. So this might be taken as an invitation to explore the rumor that we do indeed have a body. Our cognitions are embodied. Body means there's a sensation. That means a living being is here. So this is fair enough. This happens a lot for us modern people. We are very entertained. We're very much living in just the very mental sphere where our sensations are taking place on the base of our various gadgets, our various entertainments. Our jobs are very often cerebral, etc., etc. So simply just relating to the very sort of immediate raw condition, just being aware of that yanks us out of our heads. And this, of course, also is what we're doing with meditation. We're yanking ourselves out of our heads. The thing is, or our thoughts, the thing is that we're so often caught in these spheres. So it makes a lot of sense to proceed in this way. So here Steven says, the claim is that there is always a vibration, a sensation, that you see that this is so if you can relax a bit and focus on detecting and noting the arising of sensations. When we do so, we'll note, so says these texts we are exploring. We'll do so, we'll note. When we do so, we'll note, so says the text we're exploring, that there arises one of 3 sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. Breaking things apart this way, we can see how indeed this might be a very powerful way of cutting through a fascination with inert forms, let alone objects, let alone simply knowing what channel you're on. This is one of the ways of working with the sense spaces. So this is where we're aware of, not only are we are, you can say, not subject to, but we are engaged in various kinds of perceptions. We're also aware of how we're interacting with these perceptions in terms of our reactions. So this again is an increasingly, you could say, subtle, even though it's not that subtle. It is, as you could say, a further development in terms of just being aware. So Steven says one shouldn't mix dhatu analysis and ayatana analysis. They are different in approach. Dhatu analysis is knowing what channel you're on. Ayatana analysis is being aware of the rising and spreading of differentiated sensation. They are differentiated with respect to what channel is firing, but we're not connected. We're not concerned about which channel we're on. We're just noting the sensation. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neither? So it could be channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, but we're mainly just experiencing, not so much in terms of what is it, what are these moments, but rather simply just being aware of our feeling. Okay, so these were the ayatanas. So the 5 aggregates, skandhas. So these we've looked at quite a bit. In fact, we started off this whole year. It's been more than a year, I think. But anyway, before we came to Steven's book has been a year, right? Gosh. Anyway, we started off Abhidharma with studying Chögyam Trungpa's work that was called the Glimpses of Abhidharma, and that was predominantly a discussion on the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas. Anyway, in this summary here, which touches on dhatus, ayatanas, now we come to the 5 aggregates. Let's see, there's a comment here. Yes, time flies. We've been with Steven here in this book since August 2020. So yes, yeah. Gosh. Anyway, form. The skandha, or the grouping called form, consists of 10 obvious factors, 10 dharmas, plus 1 form-like but intangible factor that's not manifest, avinyapti. This latter factor names the tangible force or form of taking a vow. Right, we'll look at that later. Anyway, the 10 main factors are the 5 capacities to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. That is the senses, indriyas, factors 1 to 5, and also what is perceived or processed, the information or objects consisting of colors, shapes, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch. What we labeled as factors 7 to 11. We've looked at this a bit way back. When one analyzes according to the aggregates, one does not at all pay attention to each single channel. Rather, we just group channels 1 to 5 together and say, it's not mind, it's the aggregate of form. Of the 5 skandhas, only one of them classifies the 5 sense fields according to the capacity to process, and also the objective fields, the domains that are processed. The form aggregate does not involve those dhatu factors of 12, 13 through 18, meaning then the consciousnesses that are generated thereupon. Those are grouped separately, as we shall see, because the teaching of the skandha says to be for those who think self is mind, that mind is one thing. There is a breakdown of mind into 4 separate aggregates. So that's where we have 5 aggregates. The first then is the perception, very much of form, but it's also understood in terms of, if we look at the 12 links of dependent arising, the first of these 12 links is where we begin to think self and other. And that's where we solidify other in terms of what is perceived. And then with regards to self, this is where we then go into the skandhas, where the first form is both the perception of other, but there is also then the sense of I, and that's further then elaborated in the following 4 skandhas. So he says, in its classification, it is the opposite of the dhatu schema, which only has 1 channel concerning mind. Only 7 dhatus out of 18 are concerned with mind. Numbers 12 and 13 through 18. The point in doing skandha analysis is to be able to discern the difference between form stuff and 4 different kinds of mind stuff. So this is where we've now looked. So we're looking at really understanding our whole being. And like some would also say, and I think Steven also says, initially we could understand all aspects of our reality in terms of the 5 skandhas, because that is where we have the perception of self and other, and then the increasingly, you could say, dense experience of identity on the basis of the evolution of the 5 skandhas. So first, initially, there's ignorance that gives rise to self and other, and then there's, with regards to the perception of self, then there's an increasing sense of feeling, and we'll see here how Steven translates it. But essentially, we talk about on the basis of form, we then have feeling, concept, impulse, and consciousness. That's how it's sometimes translated. Yeah, sensation, conception, karmic formation, and consciousness. Yeah. Okay. So sensation, Abhidharma. Sensation consists of one entire aggregate, which is only one dharma. You may wonder, how can one dharma be an aggregate or a group? Vasubandhu informs us that this is classed as an aggregate since it refers to every possible sensation from the past, present, and future. And it is also the aggregation of all possible sensations of pleasant, unpleasant, and neither. It is a multiplicity of recurring sensations as one whole group. So we can identify this as what we would say a very primitive, almost binary, like, dislike. But we also, of course, have the neutral. And then there is all the, as we do, you know, when we sort of in our culture of, you know, psychological, I was reading this article, which has a great way of how our culture actually psychologizes. That's right, psychologizes everything. And we have a great language on the basis of our psychologization, in which we are always articulating feeling. You know, it's so often that how do you feel? And how do you feel about this? And we're so much about how do we feel, which if you go to other cultures, sorry, you can sort of talk with the people there, and they go and you ask them, how do you feel? They're like, what? You know, it's like, what's that got to do with the price of eggs? You know, whereas we're very much about feeling. So of course there's a huge variety of feeling, but essentially it all boils down to do I like, don't I like, or neutral. That's essentially it. It can be very, you say, primary or basic. So conception. There is also the skandha of being able to sort or isolate, to have a concept. Every situation of the past, present, and future has the skandha of conception. So this is where we begin to, on the basis of the likes and dislikes, we begin to weave a narrative. We begin to weave a story in terms of where it has quite particular classifications as good and bad. So this is where we talk about the skandha of conception. Steven says, we previously discussed this as a part of the list of ever-present factors, and it was defined as ever-present factor 2, conceptualization, samjnana. And its definition is the capacity to isolate or grab onto specific features. As an aggregate, it names all such occurrences in the past, present, and future. So on the basis of identifying a particular theme or a particular identity, then we weave on the basis of these features a reality, and that is based on our experience in the past. This is how it is, you know, tables, they function in that way, you know, Susan functions in that way, Harry is like that, and that's how they've been, that's how they are now, that's how they are. We solidify things. So that's where, on the basis of this like and dislike, we begin to weave a more, you could say, elaborate narrative onto our sensations that then become conception. And then he says karmic formation. This is the grouping which aggregates the most number of dharmas. That's actually where we've been looking at in terms of our mental factors here. in terms of wholesome, unwholesome, etc., ever-present factors, variables, and so on. Yeah. So he says this is the grouping of which aggregates the most number of dharmas or of factors of conditioned existence. Samskrita, or sometimes also called samskaras. Yeah, samskrita skanda. It includes all the 72 factors of conditioned existence, except those 4 factors grouped as the form aggregate, sensation aggregate, conceptualization aggregate, and mind or consciousness aggregate. And it includes all those factors as they occur in the past, present, and future. So basically, apart from looking at the details of the skandhas in terms of their mental aspects, these are all the various kinds of experiences that we have, all the particular ways of our mental experience, but much more than just being on, you could say, the passive side where we take in, because the reality comes at us, as we have in the first 2, the skandhas 2 and 3, which is sensation, good and bad, but also on the basis of how we then begin to be engaged and have particular impulses on the basis of that. So we have experiences that range from faith into rage, or all the things, you know, that come in between. We looked at all these various kinds of positive or wholesome and unwholesome factors. So again, these are all impulses that again come with a narrative that have to do, or a perspective that has to do with past, present, and future. Then consciousness, mind. So this is where we begin to have a whole sense of me. It's like the whole package of I is joined together through consciousness, the whole mood of who I am. How are you, you'll say. And that's where you say, oh yeah, I'm good, you know. And we actually know it's way more complex than that. But at the same time, if we're feeling particularly, you know, grumpy, or if we're feeling great on the basis of just various ways that things unfold, then we will say, oh, I feel great, or I feel really shitty, or whatever it might be. So that's where we have a sense of a complete circle of I, and that's what consciousness essentially does. Of course, it comes with a whole story, which is again has to do with the fundamental aspects of the ground consciousness, the alaya vijnana, the toxic sense of I, and then the various perceptions that we go through. But in this particular context, it's really just what you could say brings it all together. So Steven says the last of the 5 aggregates grouped together, that one dharma called mind, citta. It should be understood as aggregating the 6 different forms of consciousness or perception, the dhatus we've looked at, which is then the ways that we experience the various forms of perception, including thought. And it's said that of the 5 skandhas, it is the last one, consciousness, and it's the one that transmigrates. So when we, for example, operate with the alaya vijnana, we know that there is things that are layered on our experience and our consciousness that re-emerges continually. So this, for example, experiences of the daytime re-emerges in our dream. And it's that place of the alaya vijnana, the ground consciousness, that then gives rise to all our various perceptions. So again, in Buddhism, we don't really believe in mysteries as such. We can explain relative truth in a very rational way. So that's where getting a handle on relative truth as per the Abhidharma is very much a rational, say even empirical science or phenomenology of identifying what is happening with us. And it's within that we're then talking about the experience of the individual, that we identify that whatever the individual goes through is basically projections from this alaya vijnana, this storehouse consciousness. And it's this storehouse consciousness which then travels on. When the aggregation of our physical body dissolves, and just like when we are dreaming, then also mind continues to generate impressions, and we have this experience of bardo, and then we feel groundless and we have to reconstitute ourselves, and that's where we then take rebirth. Essentially, we could say rebirth is re-embodiment, or if you like, reconstituting ourselves. So that's where you could say this skandha continues. So Stephen says it is the vijnana skandha that goes on and on from one life situation to another, and also from life to life. It is not the forms, nor is it the sensations, the conceptualization, or even karmic formations that transmigrate. Only our habits of awareness, or what also is called vasanas, which are the particular patterning that we have laid down on the storehouse consciousness. Also, we could say karma. Yeah, also this is where karma is situated. And that's where Stephen says, only our habits of awareness continue on after our so-called death. So we might not think of it as much as a so-called death. We might live with abject, you could say, discomfort with the fact that we're going to have to leave this place. But yes, from the perspective that we're approaching this whole issue, really, this is ultimately just a phenomenon. This is just a dharma. That's a dharma of ceasing, and it's a perception, but it's the ceasing of something which never had come into creation in the first place. So the notion of death, from the Buddhist point of view, is very much a relative perception. So you can say Stephen is justified when he says so-called death. Anyway, he says these habits of awareness and perception, the fifth aggregation, continue on into different possible forms. That is why so much focus is placed on attention and awareness near the time of death. That is why it is said that mind is king, mind is sovereign, mind is the creator of everything. It's the source of everything. And of course, again, we should understand we're not attributing an absolute reality to the mind, but as far as our dualistic experience goes, being stuck in samsara, this present condition, which is on the basis of our lack of attention, our lack of awareness, this is where we then operate with this mind, which really is what creates all our experience, and through which we live all experience. So again, we're coming back to something that is not really something that can be objectified as such, but it is something that nevertheless rules and is present within all of our perceptions, attitudes, and in fact everything that we've looked at here in the Abhidharma. So that is where we says mind is king, mind is sovereign. I find it very hard to hold in my mind at the same time that the alaya vijnana is empty and does not inherently exist, and how yet it is also the one that continues. Well, that's a very good question, but that is exactly why we're practicing the Dharma. We are Buddhas, but we also are confused about our true nature. So you could say all phenomena, including the alaya vijnana, including the empire state building, including COVID, is all empty phenomena. But within our experience, it's all very real and very heavy. And that's why we presently operate within you could say a dream or a delusion that continues on the basis of previous moments of this delusion. Then we're subscribing to this delusion in unawareness. We are perpetuating this. So that's where the Buddha comes in and says, hey, you needn't actually continue to subscribe to this. So that's why we're studying Abhidharma, that's why we're practicing meditation. And that's where we are introducing this notion, this perspective of emptiness. But we do so with the understanding that while phenomena in reality are empty, we're not exactly in tune with reality. So we're presently aligning ourselves with reality through the practice of Dharma. Karmic formations don't transmigrate, but Karmic formations don't transmigrate, but karma does. I see what you mean. Well, the imprints that the karmic, when we talk about the karmic formations, then we're talking about the various kinds of phenomena that have prompted our experience, and they, as such, they're imprints. They continue. That's also why we're free to not necessarily subscribe to them or fixate on them. So they leave imprints. You know, for example, we have a moment of faith, and that has an imprint. But that, when we talk about the fourth skandha of karmic formations, these are, as you could say, essentially the ones that provide these imprints that we then carry on. So of course, with that also we continue then the seeds for the experience of the five skandhas. So we carry up, the potential is there, but the various kinds of phenomena that we are talking about here, they don't have any actual reality as such. I hope I'm interpreting Steven's statement correctly there. Okay, conclusion. Okay. This might be it. Yes, okay. Countdown. Steven says, in conclusion, I hope that the details and approaches we've explored at great length will engender an interest in the further study of Abhidharma literature and contribute to an emerging sense of what might now be properly called a Buddhist psychology of awakening. I am keenly aware that many topics discussed in Vasubandhu's Treasury of Higher Dharma, Abhidharma Kosha, Abhasha, were not explored at all. So of course, this is really just, you could say, a teaser. Steven says, I've tried to keep the discussion to what I've regarded as most salient for a contemporary audience of hopefully avid learners. May it be of benefit to many. My foremost wish is that the somewhat detailed explorations in this little book will attract the attention of those who are inspired by the words of the Buddha to really make a difference in their lives. To that end, I have tried to give a suggestive and perhaps innovative way of reflecting on these noble traditions in a way that might be of interest to contemporary readers. But the Buddha cautions us to make the teachings real for ourselves, not to fake it, not to pretend. Not to fake it, not to pretend with an outward show, but instead to develop a habit of honesty within ourselves. As we do our best to study and practice, there will be many problems, of course, but let us not be so bewildered and arrogant as to be conditioned by these problems as they arise. Pretty soon, we won't be here. Each year, we will see who is no longer alive. And you know, in time, each of us will walk the path. These teachings are not just for now, but are also for the future. And so, by way of completion, I would give myself the advice that I also share with you. How should we be? The advice is simply to do our best and try to relax. So thank you, Steven. Thank you for writing down, really. This would have come about through Steven teaching this for many years, and of course, people badgering him for to actually put some of this down. And actually, recently, people have been telling me that you can go on YouTube and you actually find lectures with Steven here and there. Steven was a very colorful character. I kept wanting to show a picture of myself with Steven. It's kind of a funny picture. I was always a little bit reluctant to show it because it's so funny. But anyway, so here I forgot this time. Anyway, Steven was a really colorful character, and actually somebody was describing how, I think there's somewhere, I can't remember, in some article somewhere, somebody was describing how people would drop into Steven's lectures really just just from the contact. You know, it might not be anything that they were studying or have any relevance to their particular field, but they just loved to hang around Steven, and he had a very sort of colorful, effusive way of teaching, and always very sort of, you could say, very broad, you know, bringing in all sorts of perspectives as he's done here. So yes, so of course what Steven also is saying here with regards to making this an actual experience, this is not intended to be something that we then all of a sudden pride ourselves of knowing Abhidharma. And of course here we're really just, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is a teaser, but it is intended to be linked up with the process of eliminating confusion. So in that sense, it's really intended to be something that we just internalize, we use as a way to working with ourselves honestly and consistently. So of course, when we do that, then we are touching on the sort of what's happening within ourselves with all our aspects of predictably neurosis and also qualities. So of course, when we unveil qualities, there's a sense of health, well-being, bliss. And when we unveil neurosis, we're aware of neurosis, then it's this uncomfortable, but at the same time, that's where Steven says, let's not be bewildered, let's not be arrogant. But sometimes when we come across neurosis, we tend to, in one way, it's out of a sense of poverty and cannot do. Then we just like to say, well, this is just how it is. And that's why it's so annoying when the Buddha comes along and says, this is workable, you can do something about it. It's like, no, I want to be stuck here. And I'm a victim of my circumstances, and I'm a victim of my neurosis. And it's due to, you know, my genetics, and it's due to my environment, and it's due to, you know, the traumas that I've had, and I can't change. It's just how it is. And that's where this actually constitutes a kind of a stubbornness, if not arrogance, and refusing to really see the conditions. And this we very often do just because we constructed ourselves and subscribe to particular narrow ways of perceiving ourselves. So that's where essentially with the last section here, Steven says, look, right now we have an opportunity. We won't be here for that long. We should make use of this. And of course, making use of this doesn't mean that we sort of like, we're soldiering on, you know, bravely and in great agony. But this is a very workable project. And doing our best, we don't need to have any regret. This is also what Milarepa says. He says the way of my tradition, the way of dying in my tradition is to have no regret. So that's where we do our best, and then we try to relax. Actually, doing our best actually is what enables us to relax. Not doing our best, that is of course where we begin to feel uncomfortable. And Tsongtse Rinpoche often says, you know, so much of the cause of our depression is really when we lack discipline and we lack actually application. But if we do apply ourselves, then there's every reason for us to be at ease with who we are and to relax. So with this study of the Buddhist psychology of Abhidharma, we've essentially been introduced to ways to understand the conditions that shape us, and also understanding how we can work with shaping our reality. So I would like to right away apologize for whatever misinterpretations I might have brought to this. And of course, whenever I do anything of these online studies, it is essentially intended to say, hey, there's a really worthwhile book, there's a worthwhile study. And of course, all of these studies, all are intended to be part of what we call cultivating the three prajnas, the three wisdoms, which are essentially what will bring samsara to an end. Prajna is what cuts through our naivete, our confusion, And it is cultivated on the Buddhist path in terms of hearing something. And that's where this is what we're doing here. And then applying it in terms of our critical thinking, in terms of looking at how does this fit all these different things that we're being taught? How do they actually fit with our personal experience? And so that's what we do with what we call reflecting. And then finally, with that clarity that emerges, we then relax. We know what it is that creates confusion. We know what it is that brings about clarity. And on the basis of that, we relax through the practice of meditation, in which we discontinue our sort of painful impulses and confused projections and all the various kind of mental factors that really constitute our confusion. We discontinue that. That is then where we relax. We understand how confusion takes place, but also understanding our innocence. Then we can relax into a condition in which we are no longer naively victim of this naivete of our conditions. So that's where it's very helpful for our meditation to have an overview like the one we have here. And this really then is essential to our process in terms of developing this prajna that will set us free. So this takes us to the end of today. And let's see here. A few more questions, yes. Relative reality is not random and manifests according to certain laws, cause and effect, yes. But actually, what actually governs this law of karma? Ah, okay. Well, so we talk about how the primordial ground, what we are, we say our natural luminous reality, beauty of our reality, is due to confusion diminished into an experience. And that's why our reality is not some objective realm. It is entirely tied up with our experience of being. And that's also why it's so difficult to map this in terms of, you'd say, an objectivist approach. It is entirely about our being, but it is a place where our being and the reality that our being experiences diminishes and falls into a dualistic condition of thinking this consciousness, thinking I, that becomes subject, and then the field becomes the perception of object. And on the basis of that, we then have what we call kleshas, which is the various ways in which we try to handle our reality. And once we act on these impulses of the kleshas, then this becomes the cause of patterns that repeat. And that is what we call karma. So what governs the law of karma are the kleshas. So the entire being situated within the entire, you could say, confused and delusional realm that is samsara takes place on the basis of the first link of the 12 links of dependent arising. So where it all comes from, where as soon as we begin to have the notion of this ignorant diminishing of reality into time and space, self and other, etc. Once that takes place, then, and we have the whole notion of time basically, then there is cause and effect. One perception leads to another experience, etc. So it's a big topic, but on the other hand, it's not that, it's really basic to our experience all the time. So someone says, wonderful book. Thank you very much. Glad that was it. Very precious teaching. Big thanks for your explanations. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. Good. All right. So so next time we'll see. I'll find something. We might just. I've recently, I do this reading here at 8 p.m. to 8:30, 45, basically somewhere between 8 and 9. I do the reading of Milarepa's song. So maybe next time we'll just do reading of Milarepa's song or something sort of something sweet and delightful. I'll see. I might find something terribly tough and philosophical, but let's see. Yeah, it's right. I was going to, like I said early on, I was going to use Andy Carr, but I'd actually like to go back to where Andy Carr has it from, which is very much this work by Khenpo Tsulten Gyatso, where Andy's book actually can serve as a supplement. So I'll make I've already been through. I've done a online study of Andy's book, so I'll make that available. But we'll go through really a great, wonderful presentation of what then is called the progressive stages on the meditation of emptiness, and that is basic to Andy's book. Yeah. All right. So it's by Khenpo Tsulten Gyatso. Khenpo Tsulten Gyatso, very much an heir to Milarepa's tradition, and also very much heir to Jamgon Kongtrul's, great Jamgon Kongtrul. Some of you would have heard of Jamgon Kongtrul. He is very close to Jamgon Khyentse Wangpo, and together with Chögyal Lingpa, we talk about this tradition of this great tradition that emerged in the 19th century and had a big impact really on the what we call the remade tradition. So Jamgon Kongtrul is one of the great remade masters, and Khenpo Tsulten Gyatso is very much an upholder of his lineage. So we'll be in good hands. We'll be in good, respectable company. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll dedicate at this point. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish, ever more and more. So we'll just take a 2-minute break, and then we'll continue with section on meditation. Okay, welcome back. And someone was just saying if I'd like to do a Tibetan language course. Yeah, you know, sure. I mean, there's so many excellent things out there. I would recommend to if you want, you know, then there are actually there's a lot online. It's probably the easiest. You know, I have a little bit of a system where I would teach people just in one day to read the alphabet and how to actually make sense of the stacks and so on. But of course, that's not about understanding. That's really just being able to read the Tibetan alphabet and the Tibetan letters. And sometimes helpful if you're doing liturgies in Tibetan, then you could just rely on the Tibetan. But let's see, yeah, maybe one day I could do that. But it also demands a lot of attention from the people participating. A little bit intense. But I would recommend actually the Rangtung Yeshe Shedra and also something called Isukya in Dharamsala. They're really excellent. They offer some excellent courses. All right, Buddhist meditation. Well, now we've looked at Steven's presentations of how we can make sense of our reality, and then it's about using that knowledge to extract ourselves from this place in which we get sucked into our habitual ways of essentially fixating. So meditation is essentially the practice of integrating this through relaxing and not being sucked into our perceptions the way that we have habitually programmed to do. So that's where meditation practice is what provides us with perspective, which is what is meant with vipassana. But it's so much premised on actual experience. So it could never be where we just generate this wisdom on the basis of intellectual knowledge. It's actual experience, and that's where we need the condition of shamatha for wisdom to take place. We need the condition of presence, mindfulness, if you like, in which then the ordinary confusion can dissipate. But we need to initially have a perspective that knows that this what we fixate on is so flawed. It's such a unfounded assumption, and that's where all the investigative analysis that we have in Buddhism really serves this objective of vipassana, not from the point of view of gathering information, but from the point of view of what we call establishing the view, that we're basically not fooled, that we know that this tiger that we are struggling with, in fact, is just a paper tiger. You go close and you see there's actually nothing there. It's a scarecrow. So that's where all this study of theory is really essential, because it is about an intellectual analysis where we use this prajna, this scalpel of cutting through our assumptions. And there we can see our flawed assumptions not holding up. Then we can relax, and then there's so much value in settling the mind and allowing the mind to clear. And that's where we discover wisdom is not something that's fabricated on the basis of information, but it's really just an abiding quality of not being confused. So there's so much to be said about this. You know, there's now for the last 13 years, I've been living here in Australia. I almost weekly, I give this half-hour talk on meditation. And there's so many different ways of approaching this. I never actually have a script for what I say in terms of presenting meditation, but one thing that I'm always emphasizing is really don't think that you can understand all of Buddhist meditation from just hearing one of these talks in 20 minutes or half an hour. It's a really big topic. But of course, if you hear various aspects over time and so on, then of course there's a lot to be gained from that. But I would also say, please consult also great works by authoritative sources, and more importantly, even study with living great teachers, great meditation teachers. Anyway, with regards to these two aspects of meditation, shamatha and vipassana, shamatha practice is the bringing the mind back to where we actually are. So with practice of meditation, there's never a sense that we have to go into a particular place. We're never struggling to come into something because we're already there. The problem is we're not always there. And so we're lost. We're lost in thought, we're lost in our heads, we're lost in non-presence. So meditation is just coming back to being present. So ideally, meditation is essentially, if we're going to be handle heavy machinery, meditation is essentially if we're going to be fully participating in our reality. And in some curious way, you actually would say that the more we're out of our heads, the more we're connected with reality. And so it doesn't exclusively it's not just the domain of Buddhists. It's something that happens to everybody all the time in various ways. It's where we come back. But it's necessary that we have some recognition of the value of this. And it's almost on the basis of, as beginners in meditation, we very often have this experience where we clearly can differentiate between being lost in thought and then coming back. You know, the sort of coming back to the breath, coming back to being present, not being lost in thought, mindfulness. That sense of being whole, being present, informs a very clear experience of actual being alive, actually being alive and fully participating. So that's where this practice of meditation, as much as you could say mindfulness is something that is, of course, based on the awareness that's present in all beings, there has to be a process in which we become aware of its validity. And that's where meditation is, on one hand, it is something that is a method, it's a technique, but it also provides a discovery into a dimension of our existence that we weren't taught in school, and that's not part of the general sort of knowledge. Even within the contemporary context of mindfulness, there's not really an awareness of the scope of mindfulness as we understand it in Buddhism. The contemporary scope of mindfulness, and I've just been reading this really interesting piece that's part of a collection that's just been published. It's called Secularizing Buddhism, and it's, you know, there's what's his name again? I forget his name, but there was some years ago, there was Purser is his name. He wrote this book that came out called Mindfulness, and it's very much about how mindfulness, the Buddhist mindfulness tradition, has been appropriated in a modern context. And initially, this of course came from the great work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, who worked with people who had pain, who had stress, and so on. And he developed what's called MBSR, and this became MBCT, mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. But all of these, and these are all very valuable modalities in their own right, but they do operate from a perspective of just trying to function better, be better, feel better. And this doesn't at all go to the bottom of the issue, really, which in the Buddhist context is that one who wants to feel better that's actually ego. That still operates with a primitive assumption about the reality of self and the reality that we perceive. And so that's why it doesn't, as such, that doesn't at all go into the bottom, really get to the bottom of things. But yes, this mindfulness is key really to the entire journey that we make in the Buddhist path, because it is where we begin to discover presence. And of course, as it's also articulated in the sort of the definition as per mindfulness in a psychological context, isn't in this condition of being present in a non-judgmental way. But is then very often that it is linked up or hijacked to the agenda of ego, to the agenda of feeling good, wanting to feel good, function better, and all of that. So it sort of goes a little bit astray, but of course, mindfulness is this condition of being fully alive and present. But we need to have it hooked up with a perspective, a wider perspective, and that is where it becomes very different when we hook it up with the insights that we develop here with the Abhidharma studies or with the Madhyamaka studies. So anyway, as far as we're concerned, the most important aspect of shamatha is then this non-distraction, but we link this up with various methods or frameworks that enable us to effectively achieve this. And that's where we have objects of mindfulness. Sometimes we have mindfulness with object, sometimes without object too. But here, I'd like to work with something that you could say cuts through confusion at a very realistic level, and that is mindfulness of breath. This universally is very helpful because sometimes mindfulness without object can sometimes lead to just wondering what exactly is it we're doing. And so mindfulness with an object is very grounding. So we have this framework then, and with the approach that I'm presenting here, we have the aspect of body, and we sit. We do some walking also sometimes, but essentially we're sitting and being properly present within a good posture. And then also we direct the attention, which normally is scattered. We direct this to the breath. And that's what we then call mindfulness. That is then mindfulness of breath. And that is where we are properly present, aware, and we sustain this presence and awareness on the basis of coming back to the reference point of the breath. We're aware of the breath as it exits our nostrils, or if we're breathing through our mouth, then breath exiting from the mouth, and it merges with space. And that is where we then allow ourselves just to relax and mingle with space, and we allow a gap as we breathe in, and again, aware of the out-breath. And this way we continually come back to this very real, non-conceptual experience in which the breath is the reference point. And as we do that, then being present, we're also aware what's happening in terms of our mind. And we're aware of thoughts, we're aware of sensations, we're aware of emotions, memories, thoughts of various kinds. And that is where we probably very quickly become humbly aware of the fact that we let ourselves be absorbed, carried away by all these memories, these thoughts, these vacuous, nebulous conditions in which we're really just thinking about what happened, what might happen, and we're not present. And it is on the basis of meditation that we again begin to arrive at this ability to distinguish between being lost in thought and being fully present. And that's where it's important that we don't further solidify this absorption by beginning to attribute labels and analysis to the thoughts. We simply just appreciate coming back to being present, and whatever thoughts there might have been, whether it's from our deepest traumas or deepest emotions, we just appreciate coming back to being present. We come back to the breath. We're not trying to avoid the content of our mind, but we're also developing and we're training in understanding how these occurrences in the mind, they are taking place in the present. And they are memories that we have, but they are essentially taking place within the present, and that's where we allow them to arise without further being absorbed in them, and we simply just let them be. So we are aware of what happens. There's no hiding or making them go away, but we allow them to be there, and simply like clouds that in no way disturb space, or like the ripples on the ocean that in no way you could say perturb or agitate the depth of the ocean, and also like we would say on the mountain, there's lots of greenery and shrubbery and so on that grows. This doesn't disturb the mountain. In the same way, all the various displays of the mind doesn't disturb the nature of the mind. So in this way, we have this approach then to the thoughts where we can simply just label everything that arises as just thoughts. Just give them that label, thoughts. We have deep trauma, thought. We have deep painful memory, trauma. We have a wonderful idea, thoughts. We just give it the label thoughts. Did I say give it the label trauma? No, just give whatever arises, give it the label thoughts. So in this way, we are aware of what's happening, and yet the arisings doesn't actually distract us from properly being present. And the coming back to the breath is very helpful in terms of having something that anchors us. Now, what we are doing with this is beginning to approach a dimension of our mind in which we're not prone to confusion, and where we actually discover a dimension of ourselves that is unconfused, where we can speak about wisdom, we can talk about a quality of the mind that is not deluded. And this is what the Buddha was pointing to. This is what the entire objective of the Buddhist path is really about, pointing to this space within the mind that is not contaminated by our projections, confusions, etc. And that's where we engage the yoga practice of recollecting the Buddha, and we approach this dimension with great reverence, with great appreciation. And that's where Buddhism sometimes is misunderstood as a religion, and the Buddha sometimes is misconstrued as being some sort of supernatural power. But we're just appreciating and celebrating this dimension of what is sacred, what is not contaminated by confusion, by ego. And that's where the approach is very much one of deep reverence. And so the sadhana that we do, the Buddha sadhana, very much operates with this language of veneration. But at the same time, the objective of that, and the entire intention of the Buddha, Siddhartha's intent, if you like, that is to introduce us to this dimension as it exists within ourselves. So when we do this practice, then at the end we dissolve the reference point of the Buddha as external, and then we settle into meditation. That is what we do here. So when we do meditation practice here, in conjunction with this liturgy from Jakob, which is an extremely sacred text, that really brings the presence of the Buddha into our experience. When we do that, then we combine that with, we do that as a preface for the meditation experience, and then on the basis of that, we then, dissolving the reference point of the Buddha, settle into meditation. And then at the end, we conclude with then what we call dedication of merit and some aspirations. So that's the program that we do here. So just another little sort of episode in meditation instruction. So again, we'll just take a few minutes where you can stretch your legs, and then we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, I last time somebody very kindly sent me a good advice in terms of how to handle this issue of when we're on the webinar, that when the bell goes off, then it makes sort of a, well, it actually doesn't. There's what's called a sound suppression system that's in function. And so that means that as soon as the bell sounds, basically the interface here shuts down the excessive sound. And of course, that's not very helpful when you're trying to, but I think you get the first little hit of the sound that comes through, right? But yeah, I have yet, actually, I have to implement this, and it's really just unticking or ticking some box somewhere in the setup configuration, but I haven't done it yet, but I'll try to get around to doing it next time. I can't right now as I'm doing this, I can't actually see if it's an option here. I don't think so. I need to go into somewhere else. But anyway, so bear with me. Once we'll have a little bit of a funny bell, but I hope it should work. Okay, thank you. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering in the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst vast clouds of offering, on a jewel-lined throne and lotus sun and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, Lion of the Shakyas. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks, clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture, his right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent, he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders, and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embraced this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed throughout beginningless time, each and every one I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings, accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teachings ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, am accumulating now, and will accumulate in the future. for the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space. May you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the three jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Deyata Om Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. 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 Deyata Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Deyata Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Om 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 Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. From the Buddha's body there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations, and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to arise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. The miraculous display of the unsurpassable wisdom appears as the intentions, deeds, prayers, knowledge, love, and ability of all the Sugatas and their children. May all beings become exactly like them. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas endowed with the divine eye of the sages and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts birth in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging nor death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind, in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seed of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the worlds in the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their horns, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those supreme among humans to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away, and those yet to come, may I train following in their way and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize the Dharmadhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings, no life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dharmata, where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping onto a self in mind is not present with any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity free of avarice. Since things do not exist as entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with a flawless ethics that is guided by rules, and an ethics that is completely pure, with an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like a vajra, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the 3 gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the 3 times, and the 3 types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta precious and sublime arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world, may the light of the teaching shine like the sun, may the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers, we pray for their precious lives to be long, we pray for their activities to spread and increase, may we be blessed never to part from the teachers. Akashasya stiti yavat yavacha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahan jagadukhani nignata. Akashasya stiti yavat yavacha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahan jagadukhani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahan jagadukhani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahan jagadukhani nignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. So thank you very much for joining in this study and practice. And yes, hopefully see you next week. Thank you very much.